we came off of going into this pandemic, our best year in terms of academic performance. We had the highest academic performance going into the pandemic that we had ever had. And, and we are so grateful for that. What we've seen during this pandemic is that actually our math performance continues to rise. We have not seen a dip in math. Our performance continues to increase. Our KIPPsters continue to learn math at a really great pace. What we have seen is a COVID slide with English language arts. And we're not surprised, right? When you think about it, it's really hard to teach kids to learn to read virtually in a virtual environment. And so we are really focused on getting the kids who need us most back in person. We are really focused on targeted intervention for our KIPPsters, particularly around reading and language arts. We're using a variety of virtual blended learning programs for in-person and virtual KIPPsters to help them close their gaps there. And for the kids who are ready, we continue to accelerate them. We were so fortunate that in this pandemic, because we were back in March, able to stand up a strong virtual learning platform early, that we actually saw less of a COVID slide than our peers across the state and across the country. And so, we celebrate that. And we are very, very focused on where we do have gaps, where our kiddos need some work, really providing targeted support, in addition to really continuing to wrap around our kids from a socio-emotional perspective. Just this morning, I was visiting a classroom with some of my teammates, visiting a classroom virtually. And this teacher had all of her students were virtual. And, I think Eric, one of my teammates from our development team, Eric Schmidt, who is a former KIPP school leader himself, so poignantly said, these kids have actually never been in the same room together physically. And they have actually never met this teacher in person. Their entire experience this year has been virtual for those kids in that classroom today. And yet the teacher had incredible relationships with our kiddos. Kids were sharing things like, I had to have surgery because I had a lazy eye condition. And while I was scared about that, now I have hope. And now I hope that I don't have to wear glasses one day. They were sharing things like, I really miss going to a park and being able to play outside with my friends because of the pandemic. And one day I hope to go back to parks. And they were sharing all of this while actually learning about verb tenses, which was pretty amazing, right? So it's just a reminder of our teachers are heroes. They are making it work virtually, and they are making it work in our in-person classrooms. And so as we talk about advocating for them today, I ask you that you strongly advocate for our KIPPsters. You support them as you have already done. You continue to do that, and you take action for them as we enter legislative session, because they are doing incredible things in our classroom. They are learning at a great pace. They are really closing their gaps, and their teachers are just our heroes. So with that, I'll actually turn it over to our advocacy team. It's my pleasure to introduce to you someone who many of you already know, Addie Gomez, who leads our advocacy work as our Deputy Chief of Advocacy across the state for KIPP Texas. So Addie, it's all you.
Thank you, Seba, so much. I was in that class visit this morning, and it's just, there's no better way to start the day. Our teachers are just absolutely amazing. I'm so glad to see some familiar faces and some new faces here today. I want to just take a little, if we'll just back up one slide, I want to take just a minute and introduce our team so that you get to know us if you don't know us already. This is the first year that KIPP Texas is going to have, a full-time person in all 4 regions after the merger, and have really a robust advocacy program with boots on the ground in every region. I think KIPP Texas, you'll hear from our team in a little bit about a long history that KIPP has in terms of advocacy and civic engagement. And so kind of taking it to this next level organizationally is a really, really exciting step this year. So I'm Addie. My background is in policy and politics, mostly on education and public charter schools. I'm a former legislative staffer, a recovering legislative staffer, and really, really happy to be home at KIPP, where I really know a lot of the people in this environment, and I love the mission mission. And it's really, really nice to be working in politics on one single issue and not to have to get distracted by the hundreds that our lawmakers have to deal with. I also want to introduce to you Tasha. Tasha, will you come off mute and just wave so maybe your box will pop up? There's Tasha Dennis.
Oh, good afternoon.
Thank you. Tasha is kind of a triple threat. She's a member of the advocacy team and has been for a couple of years. She's also a KIPP parent. Both of her kids attend KIPP Mosaic, one of our newest schools in Houston. And she's also one of the original KIPP alum. So Tasha knows this organization from the inside out, and it's just an incredible gift to have her on our team. And Brandon Vance, you'll also hear from Brandon later. He is based in Dallas. Hey, Brandon. And also has been with KIPP in another capacity before. He was one of our incredible college counselors with our KIPP Through College program, but really has a heart for politics and a passion for advocacy, and is deeply, deeply involved in politics in Dallas on a personal level. And it's just a huge asset because he really understands the importance of mobilization. He understands the process and the players. So we just have an incredibly gifted team. We are about to bring on our San Antonio Regional Advocacy Manager, but I don't have that person here yet to introduce. So soon they'll be on our website, so you'll be able to meet them. I really want to, we're about to kick off a Texas legislative session. It just started a couple of weeks ago and really is going to get going in earnest. So that's what we're going to focus our time on today. But Tasha, will you just sort of give us a little bit of a grounding and a background kind of about KIPP and advocacy?
Absolutely. So KIPP Texas has a rich history of advocacy. And as Addie mentioned, I was there to witness it in its early days, but we really focused on showing up when the big moments were happening in the halls of the Capitol or any seat of government, connecting elected officials directly to our classrooms, students, and communities, helping to secure major policy initiatives like the facilities funding our KIPPsters deserve as KIPP public school students. And we certainly have had to raise our voices throughout 2020 as an organization, from speaking out against police brutality that resulted in a near-death experience, unfortunately, for one of our own KIPPsters here in Texas. So we've really focused on advocating for our teachers to access the COVID vaccine as well, so that they can feel safe and keep doing the job that they love. One of the most poignant memories that I have as an alum, parent, and staff member working with this team has been my conversation with the parent at one of our in-person events, obviously pre-COVID, where we were at KIPP Connect, and a parent came up to me and he said that he wanted to elevate his voice using our language that we were helping him to navigate, elevate his voice to advocate for a simple request. And his request was that he wanted his KIPPster to have access to a science lab in his building. And as we know, the facilities funding is a major hurdle for us. And it was, for me, an example of again, such a simple request. And I explained that equitable facilities funding will provide that. And that's why we continue to fight. And the next item on his list, of course, he had a short list, but the next item on his list was a soccer field. And these small things are meaningful to parents. We try to focus on them as much as we can to understand their story and what brings them to us in the work that we do in advocacy. So he was choosing a great education by bringing his son to KIPP, but he wanted those extra plus items that our families can unfortunately miss due to inequitable facilities funding. So, obviously we don't want him to have to sacrifice those trimmings of a traditional school campus. And that's what we fight for every day. So that was a powerful moment for me. It really solidified why we continue to support our families, to advocate and understand the importance of being willing to share their stories. So that all bottled up really means that we're focusing on civic engagement. And together with our students and families, we continue to understand the importance of naming those things that we're not willing to sacrifice in the name of a great education for our students. As an organization and as a team, every public charter school movement to us is a big movement. It's large, and it's been coming to the realization for about 10 years now that civic engagement has become mission critical for this work. Some are surprised to hear this, And many wish that this wasn't the case given the current state of politics. However, we really have had to lean in and help our families understand the importance of things like registering to vote or simply going to vote. And these are tangible things that we continue to work on, realizing that these are the reasons why this work is so important. And we're going to continue to dig into ways to make our classrooms in our communities a real hotbed for this work as it continues to spread throughout KIPP, Texas, and the nation. We're obviously directly impacted by everything that happens in the political sphere, and the ways that we can continue to grow KIPP, Texas is through civic engagement, building our muscles together with our communities and our families. So how does KIPP Texas incorporate advocacy into our work as a public school? We really have 3 guiding principles in that arena that center this focus. First, we're a nonpartisan, non-political organization. That means that KIPP Texas is a 501c3 nonprofit and a public school. So we are required to be a nonpartisan organization that does not show preference for any political ideology. This is a core pillar for us because we educate, employ, and welcome people to the KIPP Texas community from all backgrounds. And our role as an advocacy team is to provide opportunities for elected officials at all levels of government, regardless of party, to connect directly with members of our community. We also work with an equity lens first, meaning that we have a responsibility to understand policy proposals and weigh those against not only the best interest of our own students, but more importantly, through the equity lens that considers the interest of all students in the Texas public school system. While we focus a lot of our work on charter school specific issues, we also closely follow broader education and social justice proposals as well. And finally, together with families and communities. This is the one that's so close to my heart. This is the opening line of our KIPP mission statement, and it grounds the work that we do across the organization. From a civic engagement lens, this means that we must see ourselves as agents of empowerment and connection to our families. The stories of our families, students, and staff have power. It's our job not to dictate talking points to be regurgitated, but instead to build deep and meaningful relationships so that anyone in the KIPP Texas community who wants to be civically engaged can come to us to learn how to do that, no matter the issue, and they do.
Thanks, Tasha. And I think one of the really helpful things for us to understand why this is mission critical is to go back to the beginning. This is the original charter school law that was passed in the state of Texas in the mid to late 90s. And so I think it's a really helpful reminder. We are a creature of the political process. We only exist because 181 elected officials in the Texas legislature allowed us to exist through this bill. It sets out some really lovely, usually policy language is really boring, but I actually really love this one, just some kind of a vision for what public charter schools were supposed to accomplish and really what our charge is from the state of Texas as stewards of public education dollars and of people's students. Improve student learning, of course, increase choice within the public school system, which is always really important for us as advocates to remember that we are a public open enrollment, tuition-free charter school. We're part of the public school system. We were also created to address a crisis teacher shortage at the time and create more professional opportunities for teachers, more competitive markets for them. We find ourselves in that situation again right now as a result of COVID. And then I think the most important one here, the most kind of earth-shaking one, the most reformy thing here is this number 4, establishing a new form of accountability. What that really means is parents. It means that as a public charter school, we don't have a base of students that are just automatically going to come to our doors. Everything we do is about parent choice and about meeting the demand in our own communities. So this one is the really kind of the thing that sets public charter schools apart and that really shook the system back then and really does now. And then number 5, of course, I think we all know and love this about charter schools, that they really are able to utilize new and innovative learning methods. I think COVID, if anything, has proven how innovative teachers are across the public school system. So, the charter schools just really allow a lot of different mission types to exist and fill niches inside of communities and really, really meet community demand. When this law was passed, it was almost unanimous and it was bipartisan. That is no longer the case. By contrast, the last legislative session, we saw over 40 anti-charter bills filed. And some of those are subtle and some of those are outright restrictions on the ability of us to grow it at all. Some of them are prohibitions to shut us down altogether. They really run the gamut. And so we're really facing some pretty challenging political headwinds this legislative session. Just to give you a sense of kind of who our decision makers are in our community, we've got 33 lawmakers in the Texas Senate and the Texas House that directly represent a KIPP campus. Disproportionately Democrat, which is normal based on the fact that we are all in urban large cities, which tend to lean left. And they've got quite a lot of concentrated power between them. 4 of them serve on education committees that make huge decisions about teacher salaries, curriculum, hours, attendance, funding, so many different choices that are made by those lawmakers. And then 10 serve on budget writing committees. So between these 33, there's a lot of power concentrated, and it's really, really important that we do a good job as an organization and as friends of KIPP, just to be in their ear and to help them understand what KIPP Texas is, who our families are, what our mission is, and why we're involved. And on this next slide, let's just walk through just a few kind of issues of what we're watching this legislative session. I know we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end, so I'm not going to go really deep into any of these, but I at least want to give you a sense of what we're seeing. The things that are really on our mind kind of fall into 3 buckets. One of them is just protecting our ability to expand. This runs the gamut of all kinds of different proposals, many of which are politically motivated limits on our expansion. I think as an organization, we fully welcome limits on our expansion that are based on quality and that are based on student outcomes and safety. Those sort of guardrails, we really believe the state of Texas has an important role to play there. Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of that motivation be political and not really student focused. So we're really concerned about playing some defense and making sure that our ability to expand and grow to meet the demand of our families stays intact. Number 2, a broad principle of fair and student driven funding for all public school students. We are reaping the benefits. Our students are reaping the benefits of HB3, some major school finance legislation from last session, which has been incredibly helpful, especially for students from low-income backgrounds. So we're really hoping to join together with public school allies across the spectrum and fight to keep those funds in place. We don't expect any major reductions in funding, fingers crossed. And if that comes, our argument only is that the cuts not be disproportionately placed onto public charter school students and that all students be treated fairly. And then third, we're seeing a really difficult challenge in our local cities. We're seeing, and it's not a KIPP specific issue, but public charter schools broadly are having difficulty getting some really small, minute details put in place at the local level. Sometimes it's proper trafficking, sometimes it's proper stop signage, sometimes it's a permit. We've seen some resistance at the city level to some of these really basic kind of regulatory functions that have actually ended in some student safety issues. Where we didn't have proper lighting or the right traffic signal that we needed, and so a student was injured on the way to school. That's happened in more than one public charter school. So those are really kind of the 3 buckets that we watch for. Right now, about 130 education bills have been filed, over 1,600 bills total. So it remains to be seen how many of these will survive. We're still in the very early stages of the legislative session. And then we'll go to this next slide. I want to turn it over to Brandon to walk us through some of the how. What are some of the practical ways that our team recommends as best practices to really follow along? So Brandon, can you just kind of walk us through some of those good tactics?
Absolutely. Thanks, Addie. So whether you're going for the upcoming legislative session or going to a city council vote on a permit or a textbook debate at the State Board of Education, it can all feel very intimidating. It can make you very nervous, especially if you're signed up to speak. We did a Google search of a simple graphic of what the legislative process looks like here in the state of Texas. And this is what we came up with. Pretty simple, you know, this side, this section, yes here, no there. Very, very simple. But sometimes, admittedly, the process looks a bit complicated on paper. The good news is that we have great advocates who don't have to live and breathe. So you don't have to live and breathe this stuff all day, because we take care of that. We live it, we love it, and we're deep into this. All that matters at the end of the day is your story, your why. And it's different for everyone. You know, why I am here, why I came to KIPP is one story. Why Tasha is here, you know, as an employee, as a staff member, is a whole nother story. And so everyone has some version. You know, when I talk to alum, it's, you know, there's a version of the story that relates to when they were kids. And now if they're back as staff members, there's a version of the story as to why they came back. It's actually possible and accessible to make civic engagement a regular part of your routine. Your voice matters. Lawmakers really do read your messages and they see your phone calls. Legislative staffers and officials really can be influenced by your story. You don't need to be a policy expert, most of us aren't, or a process expert, most of us definitely aren't that. It's about relationships and authenticity and speaking your lived experience to the people in power. They work for you, remember that. We don't work for them, they work for us. There are some folks here today that I'm excited to see in the room, and they know what I'm talking about. You know, they've shared their story. They've shared, you know, how they got to this place in time. They've talked about, you know, what KIPP has done for them. And so I actually want to call on one or two people real quick so that they can share their story. I'm just reminding them that we're non-political. And so if we can unmute, maybe call on Luis Reyes. And Luis, you can share us your story.
Hey, Brandon. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I had a pretty special experience. I was actually part of the founding class here in Dallas. And so I decided to come back and work for KIPP because I know what I received here was something special. This education that I received here changed my circumstance, changed my narrative. And so as I progressed through my academic career and joined the workforce, I always knew that there was a small organization in Southern Dallas that was making great things happen. And I knew I needed to be here. So that's what I decided to do. And I joined as a fundraiser. I'm 2 years in, and I know that for us here in our department, it's about scaling the mission so that everybody who wants a KIPP education can receive one, and everybody has an opportunity to, like the one that I received. And so for me, it's very personal, and I'm glad to be here.
Outstanding. Thank you, Luis. And we also have another alum, Dolores Lozano is in the room. Dolores, can you share with us your story and why education?
Yes, so I will say that education is the most powerful weapon that can be used to change the world. It changes the trajectory of so many lives. I know I can speak to how much it's changed my life. And for as long as I can remember, I believed educational opportunity was a concept based on fairness. But now we're seeing that that's not really the story. To my surprise, as I progressed over the years, it became clear how important equity was in the work that we're doing here at KIPP. I'm so proud to embody representation and be a new member of the KIPP Texas Board of Directors. I firmly believe now more than ever, it's time for us to leverage our assets to empower the next generation of leaders at KIPP, not only at KIPP, but across all of our schools. And I think with that achievement, a community of young people crushing structural barriers and turning their dreams into reality is going to be a success beyond measure. So education is just important, and pushing that is my goal in life.
Thank you both. I really appreciate you, stepping out and sharing your story and sharing your perspective. And it's great to see y'all staying engaged. Addie? You want to take that from there?
Thank y'all both. That was amazing to hear from you guys. I want to just, before we give time for Q&A, just walk you through a few really simple, practical pieces of advice that I have for anybody who wants to stay involved in the Texas legislature. These are 4 simple links. You might want to take out a phone and take a screenshot of this just for quick reference. 4 things that we recommend that you do if you want to kind of stay engaged, but don't want this to be your #1 job and dominate your life. First, go to our KIPP Texas advocacy page and sign up for advocacy alerts there for periodic updates on charter school related legislation, big regulatory issues, elections coming up. We'll be doing a lot of voting work in the next few years. The second one is the main home website for the Texas legislature. I highly encourage you to go create your own account. It's incredibly user-friendly. It takes maybe 5 to 10 minutes. You can sign up for all kinds of other issues. If you don't really want to follow, kind of a regulatory charter school related bill, and you're much more interested in property tax reform, you can do that and customize it. And it really helps you kind of learn the lingo and learn the rhythm and figure out who the players are. You can set up customized alerts. So that's a really important tool. Number 3, that link will take you to who represents you. So please, 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 if you don't already know who represents you at every level of government, visit that easy website. And I would encourage you to take out your phone and save those people in your phone as contacts, just as if you would after a business meeting or a friend. Make sure that they're in your phone, and so that if you hear something on the way to work, or if you have a big issue, you don't have to go fumbling and looking for their contact information. You know exactly who to go to. And then last, and definitely the most important, if you're eligible to vote in Texas, we really want to make sure that people keep up with their registration. If you've moved, you'll have to change it. Really, I like to encourage people to make this sort of part of their family's annual routine, just like your teeth cleaning and your vehicle registration. Just make sure your voter registration is up to date, and don't wait until the last minute, because getting registered in Texas is a pain. So I want to stop there with those practical tips, and we're happy to take any questions. And I think our team might have some. I haven't been able to monitor the chat the whole time. Oh, thanks, Tasha, for putting those in the chat.
Thanks, Addie, and thanks, team. Please, everyone, this is your time. You can ask our team anything related to advocacy or related to any of our work. So please go ahead and put your questions in the chat. And while you're doing that, one of the questions that we received is beforehand, actually, is what are we doing as KIPP Texas to instill equity in our hiring practices and how our children are disciplined? So I'd actually love to invite Chelsea, who's our Senior Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, to come off of mute and share our 5 KIPP Texas initiatives around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I will say that as Champion Equity is one of our values, we actually believe that our DEI work is not separate from everything else we do. It's not an add-on initiative. It is actually central and core to our work, and it is a regular part of our academic programming. And so we have 5 things that we're particularly focused on in the moment. And Chelsea, if you could share those, that would be great.
Yes, thanks so much, Zeba, for inviting me into the conversation. I'm happy to be here and excited to know that this is a place where we come and are able to share externally with our partners and community. So that's awesome. So thinking about our 5 initiatives that we are prioritizing as we continue to push this work forward. One is continue to implement mandatory as well as ongoing diversity, equity, and inclusion training for all of our staff members. So that training has already started with our leaders. We're engaging our board members as well as all of our chief people all across our organization. That work has already started, and we want to just really continue that. We know that that work is not something that you can just check off the list, but that work needs to continue. It needs to continue. We need to continue to have these conversations. We need to continue to engage because that we can't ever be done with this work in terms of equity and providing people what they need, providing our students what they need, and doing that self-reflection work to make sure that we're continuing to put them first and being aware of our biases that we have as well. So that's one thing. And in terms of the training that we want to continue to push forward, another priority is truly thinking about, as Seba mentioned, in terms of our equitable hiring practices, policies, as well as procedures. So when we think about that, when we think about DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion, we know that oftentimes though those biases can come into place when we think about the ways in which we hire, the processes that are behind some of our hiring decisions. And so that's something that we don't want to take for granted or don't want to leave as something that we're not aware of. We're very much so aware of how those biases can come into play. So we want to make sure that we're we're actually doing a deep dive into those hiring practices and making sure that they are equitable as we continue to move this work forward. Another thing in terms of the discipline that Seba mentioned is we are actually having a work group. We have a work group that is positioned and set up. We have multiple work groups actually across our KIPP Texas organization, two of which one's focused on discipline and the other is focused on those hiring practices that you heard of as well. And so that's another initiative that we're continuing to move forward so that we can look at the data and understand what is the data telling us about our practices in terms of discipline and students across all of our regions as well as our schools. And then doing the hard work and asking ourselves those difficult questions of how can we service our students better? How can we ensure that no one demographic of our students is disproportionately represented in the data that we see? And so I'm excited to see those recommendations come out of the work of the work groups as we continue to engage over the next several months. And then another initiative that we're looking at for the fourth initiative is truly auditing our curriculum. And so this is also another work group that we have positioned to first look at that data, of course, understand what is our curriculum currently and how can we improve this? So truly thinking about culturally relevant pedagogy, wanting to make sure that we are embracing our students and we see our the entire child and that we truly are valuing their perspective and their lived experiences and we're elevating those and embracing those and loving those in the classroom and wanting to make sure that our curriculum isn't doing some things unconsciously as far as suppressing our students and who they are and their identity, but actually bringing that and using that as an asset in the classroom. And so that's a lot of work that's going to go around in terms of curriculum and truly taking a very deep look at that and making any changes and making any necessary improvements there. And then the last piece is continuing to leverage the findings of, we did a KIPP Texas audit about last year, about over the summer into this year as well. And so we found a lot of information that came to the surface in terms of the audit. And we want to continue to leverage the information that we've had and that we've seen. And so that is truly something that is embedded in everything that we do. So that's going to be embedded in a lot of the work of the work groups. That's going to, you're going to see some of those information being shared here in advocacy as well. And so that's something that we won't necessarily name every single time because that is something that is truly being embedded and governing our actions and pushing us forward as we continue to try to make progress on this commitment.
Chelsea, thank you so much. And I see a few in the chat. Seba, I'll go ahead and jump in and take that one. And let me just really quickly add on, there's a lot of overlap between what some of the stuff that Chelsea just walked us through and our role as advocates. For instance, on curriculum. KIPP Texas is a public school, and so our curriculum is required of us by the state of Texas. And so there's only so much we can push on before we bump up against the state requirement. And so there's really a hand-in-hand partnership on, the inside on the ground teachers who are telling us like this is a real big limitation and us being able to translate that into some sort of a policy initiative in the long term. I'm seeing a few questions in the chat that are sort of related about all the normal events that we would normally be doing as a community at the Capitol. National School Choice Week is next week. You'll probably see, some social media and things like that, but there won't be a big rally. We won't be having any big in-person events. The Texas Capitol is open to the public. And from what I've seen in the first week of the legislative session have been really careful and requiring some a negative test for a lot of the members for some of the bigger events, offering free rapid tests for every visitor who wants one, single entry point, mask requirements, social distancing, that sort of thing. There will be some in-person testimony allowed, and it looks to me like that's going to be the bulk of testimony is going to be in person. So, it's a real big challenge because cases, as we know, are on the rise in all of our cities. It's not going to be safe for us to do any big mobilizations right now, but there will be times where we will have to do virtual events, and there will be a lot of times when we have virtual meetings. And I think Saki specifically asked if we were going to have a KIPP Texas virtual day. Yes, and it will be virtual, and it will be really similar. Quick meetings with legislators. Make sure that you go to the kipptexas.org/get-involved page so that you can fill out our advocacy survey. That way we know that you want to hear from us when events events like that come up. So we're going to be doing our very best to reach lawmakers virtually. It's no substitute for having our families and our kids there in person. It just is not. But that's why right now we really, really need a lot more advocates in the space, because as many messengers as we can get, the better. The many messengers we can get saying pro-charter, positive, informed things about KIPP Texas and the public charter school sector in general. That's really, really important right now.
Hey, Addie, 2 questions for you. Let me do one and then I'll come back with the second one. The first is, I often hear from our board members, our friends, our supporters, hey, I really want to go and advocate for KIPPsters, but I've never done it before and I don't really know what to do. Can you talk us through some of the support that our team provides for folks who want to get involved?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the first thing that we do that removes the barriers that we're staying engaged in it. And you know, KIPP Texas is also members of the Texas Public Charter Schools Association. So we've got a really good pulse on sort of where the big issues are coming up and when we really, really need advocates in the room. So, you know, that means that our community broadly doesn't have to just stay glued to their phone and watch every minute of a committee hearing. We try to make those opportunities really clear and bold and available when we really need that to happen. And secondly, you know, we really can also just be sort of on-demand consultants for anybody in the KIPP Texas community for things like testimony before City Council. We did that over the summer. We had, you know, several members of the KIPP Texas community who really wanted to speak up to the Austin City Council after one of our students was injured. Wasn't necessarily a KIPP Texas specific official event, but I walked through every one of those people who wanted to testify one by one, and we got their testimony to where it felt comfortable for them. We practiced. And so a lot of it's just practice. And then we offer training. We offer training inside of KIPP to each, to our own other departments. We offer training to our board members on a regular basis. And normally we would be doing in-person training for our parents and doing some of that virtually now.
And speaking of families and parents, Addie, can you talk a little bit about how we engage families and parents and what we're planning to do this year in particular?
Sure. I mean, you know, we believe in really traditional old school organizing, which means relationship building. It means a lot of one-on-one conversations with families. It means breaking the work down into manageable pieces because we have 30,000 families. And so that's really hard. So some of it is just making sure that we're communicating with our community through SEDLA's communication challenge channels and through school leader channels about big issues that are coming up. And then it also means that hopefully when we get back to in-person, we'll get back to doing a lot of our in-person training where we really can sit in a room with parents and work through our stories and get parents comfortable doing this. We have a really high population of Spanish-speaking parents, and it's an especially huge challenge for them. So a lot of work goes into making sure that the work is accessible to them as well. So those are just a few examples. I could go on and on and on about parents, but I see that we're running up on time. So I'm happy to entertain any more questions to my email box or email Eric or Seba, whoever you'd like. I'm happy to talk about this anytime, but I do want to hand it over to Anne to close us out.
Thank you so much, Addie and Brandon, Tasha, Luis, Dolores. Thank you so much for sharing with our community a bit about our advocacy work and for all that you do to advocate for our KIPPsters. And then thank you everyone for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure to see you from start to finish, and thank you for taking time to be a part of what we're doing. Thank you so much to our board members and supporters who continue to engage with KIPP Texas. On behalf of KIPPsters, your work is just so important. Your advocacy and support means so much to us. And if you're not a current supporter, we hope you'll consider becoming one and joining the KIPP Texas team and family by supporting this work. And then finally, I just want to lift up for you that we hope you'll save the date for our next webinar. It will be on April 21st, 2021. It's been such a pleasure for us this year to really spend this time with you, talking with you about issues that we're facing at KIPP Texas and what we're doing to ensure that in this really challenging season, our kids continue to get that KIPP Texas experience and that opportunity that they so richly deserve. So thank you for being here with us. Thank you for supporting us, for advocating on behalf of our KIPPsters, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks so much, everybody, and we hope you have an awesome rest of the day.